It's funny that you mentioned that.
Oh,
Because I read something today on the old Twitter of
I hate you and your segue.
a comic book creator who had some ideas and some feelings about...
He had emotions.
Yeah, those two. About how comic books
I'm
could be doing better.
I'm just bringing it up so we can snippet parts of it.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So this one comic book creator, Jimmy Palmiotti.
Yep. Well done on the name.
Thanks. He's working on Harley Quinn. He's one of the creators of
Super Zero.
I knew the first word was super, but
Sorry, I got you.
I was getting all kinds of second words thrown in there. Super Zero.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oof. Super Zero. And an all around a good handshaker. So.
Well, interesting fact.
Yeah.
If you ever meet him, be prepared for a great shakeage of the hand.
That's right.
Okay, so what did he do?
Well, I stuck my hand out, and then he grabbed it, and
God,
we shook, and it was great.
Oh my gosh, I walked right into that. Like, oh my, I'm so mad at myself. Like, I just.
Oh man, I wasn't even. You're great. You're great.
I'm sorry to everyone who had to hear that. Oh,
It's fine.
it's not.
It is. It's great.
not.
It's making me happy. I'm still happy.
Oh.
You're really dragging it out.
Why? Because it hurt.
Yeah.
So what else besides sticking his hand out that's relevant to this conversation? What are we talking about?
We're talking about, like, what could comic books be doing better?
And he had an opinion.
Yes, he did.
And he posted it, looks like on Facebook.
But then again on Twitter.
And then snapped that and brought it over to Twitter.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And basically says that comic books need to be doing things wildly different.
Yeah, he did not like the whole issues system, the issue by issue.
He does not like individual issues.
Right.
If I'm summarizing correctly, what he's saying is that the story should be published as stories, arcs.
And not as chapters.
Correct. So, yeah, I guess that would be a good, like, reverse way of saying, like, who publishes a book chapter by chapter.
Right.
You get the whole book, and then you read it, and you enjoy it, and you're done.
And then you get the sequel or the next
Right,
part
right.
or whatever,
Whenever it comes out.
However that
Yeah.
story
If
works.
If you're certain authors, 3-4 years. Patrick Rothfuss. Sorry. Yep. Name on the Wind. He has sequels, and it's been, like, forever since. I love him, though. He's great.
Sure.
But
Even as bad as George R.R. Martin and his books.
nope,
And
he's way worse.
Yep.
So, but yeah, so it's basically like he goes into the fact that we will still be getting
books weekly.
weekly books, but there'll just be more substance to each one of those books.
Mm-hmm.
So, say like you're someone like me who picks up 25 individual issues
Mm-hmm.
on a week. You won't actually be buying 25 individual issues. Let's say you'll get 5 books,
Mm-hmm.
but each one of those books has a story arc in it, so 5-6 books each. So really you're picking up 30 books at a time.
Right.
And you'll be able to do this weekly because, and I like this, because of how many titles Marvel and DC have.
Right. They have so many titles that they'll be able to churn out new books.
On top of the indie comics.
Right.
And I think like his idea for doing away, first of all, this is all never going to happen. No, because we are not a mover and a shaker, and we do not have any influence anywhere. But if we did, I would love this because it would just. So part of the problem with comic books is the idea for the story happens before the execution, which is fairly typical. You don't execute an idea, but it develops as the books go along.
Right.
So like if I'm going to write a sci-fi book, I
Mhm.
have to have the idea and then execute the entire idea from beginning to end
Mm-hmm.
and then publish it.
Mhm.
A comic book, I can have an idea, execute part 1,
Mhm.
execute part 2, and then develop part 3 and part 4, part 5 as I'm executing part 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So, perfect example is Joyride,
Hey, that's what I was thinking. I was
Yeah.
going to bring that up.
where it was supposed to be ongoing, and then he was like, nope, this has an end.
Right.
So now it's ending. So
Which is so cool when stories write themselves.
it's amazing, but here's where Mr. Palmiotti's idea works out way better. Is that instead of getting Joyride 1, 2, 3, 4, Jackson Lansing could have been like, okay, I have this story. I'm developing it. We're doing the book. oh, it turns out what I thought I could do multiple series of, this book's going to have its ending, and I'm going to give you Joyride to read all of it in one shot. I personally, man, I have so many thoughts on this.
Let them out.
Because
shotgun them.
First of all, this would make it so much easier for new readers to jump into books. Because
that's a lot to commit to. That's my thing. Where
but
it's like
not.
it's nice to have like a book, and I know that Jimmy Palmiotti mentions like shelf life, where books will be able to stay on shelves longer. They're not getting like thrown to the back of the store,
right,
and everything like that. But to try one issue isn't that more fiscally responsible, and isn't it easier to test things out than just buying, the whole 6 issues all at once?
Yes and no, because how many books have you bought where you're like you said, you make it to issue 3 and like, I'm done. That was just over and over and over and over. Whereas with the whole bundle, first of all, you're more likely to make it through the story. And who knows how many stories you've missed because it lulled on issue 3 and 4, but picked back up on 6, 7, 8. And I also think there's something to be said for reading a story from beginning to end, maybe not in one sitting, but like having that there, because I think you're less likely to get bored.
True, because you already have the next couple of issues.
5 weeks sometimes between books.
Yeah.
And like, think about how many stories you've read in between. It's just like it's so much easier to get wrapped up in those characters, in that story, in that world, in that one sitting, than it is to go, okay, here's the end of this issue. Oh, I like it. Now I have to wait a month. Like, think about Lady Mechanica books. Like, just being able to just get that whole arc in one shot. Like, that's how stories are meant to be read.
True.
And from what I understand about like sales numbers and stuff like that, newer audiences are more likely to get into books when they get the whole thing.
Yes, it is. Like, in that sense, it is easier to jump in because I don't have to worry about committing to this monthly thing that I have to go back to and remember.
Right. And
right? I can just do this one and done.
Yeah. And I think it would just, because what that would do for Marvel and DC would benefit indie comics wildly too. Because now everything gets evened a little more. Like, I get that the IPs like Batman, Wolverine, like, they have their draw with their audiences. But because full stories are being published, I think it'd be more likely to have audiences go, well, what's this whole story that I like? Like Tokyo Ghost.
Right.
You're like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. Like, it's just, again, committing to individual issues for indie comics is a problem. But when you have the whole book in front of you,
right,
I think it's far easier to go like, well, frick, this sounds pretty cool. I'll try out this. Because the mentality, it's like reading an actual book. So your mentality of like trying different genres and different things, it really kind of separates from the idea of like the current comic mentality where I only read Marvel. Whatever.
Oh man, those people suck.
I don't know. Some of his.
No, but you're totally right, because I was talking with a friend who I didn't think would really be interested in comics, but turns out he watched a couple of our episodes and was like, well, what should I read? And I was like, well, what do you like? And he's like, sci-fi. And I'm like, there's no way you like sci-fi. That's such a cool thing I learned about you. And then she's like, oh, Empress. Empress has got to be the book that I recommend, but the trade doesn't come out till February. Right. And so it's just like, well, I'm not going to give him individual issues. Right, that's a hassle.
Yeah.
So just there's another pro column checkbox.
Well, and he even broke down like how many pages we get. It's like, if the average book is this many pages and they go like a story arc's 10, then so now we're getting like graphic novel size books, which typically are just more impactful because of the way stories are delivered. Like, it's just,
with the beginning, the middle, and the end,
right, all in your hands. Like, and it's just it's amazing to me that comic books from inception to now have changed none.
Yeah.
I mean, like, art style, all that stuff, even some of the stories being told, sure.
Right. Size and printing, but it's usually a magazine.
But it's the same little magazine with the same, like, every month, like, true believers come back type stuff.
Yeah.
And I just think audiences are far more... that was during a time when comics were specifically being tailored to kids.
Right.
Now it's not the case.
Right.
Like, I would dare say that most comic books aren't kid-friendly.
Right.
So now you're looking at, like, young adult teenagers, and they're far more likely, and here's the other thing that I was thinking about. You're far more likely to develop a fan, like a hardcore fan of your work, if you give them a whole piece of your work to devour. Because the minute they like it, so like you put Fairyland, like the first arc of Fairyland in front of somebody, they're either going to go, nope, I don't like this by the page 10, and put it away, or start hitting Scotty Young up on Twitter and be like, I need more of your stuff.
Right.
Because I just read this whole thing, and now, like, it's the way authors develop fans of, like, their series and stuff like that, where you give them a whole book, and you're like, well, I really like that. What else you got? And then they're on to the next one, the next one, the next one. Next thing you know, they're, like, buying anything that you will shovel out.
Shoot, don't matter.
But with individual issues, you miss that. Like, you genuinely miss that.